In this lesson, we're going to be going over the Pythagorean Theorem, and it's something that you will use very frequently, not only in our class, but also when you get up into geometry and your higher level math classes. So what the Pythagorean Theorem says is it basically shows the relationship between the sides of a right triangle. It has to be a right triangle. It cannot be any other type of triangle. And it was discovered by an ancient philosopher named Pythagoras, so it was named after him. Now, a little review of a right triangle. A right triangle has to have a right angle, a 90-degree angle. And the Pythagorean theorem, again, only works if it's a right triangle. So what Pythagoras noted was that if you take your right triangle, so here's the right angle in that picture, and if you make a square out of each individual side, so this side is side A, so if we take and make a square out of that, here's side B, if we make a square out of it, and here's side C, if we make a square out of it. If you take the sum of squares A and B, so if you add A and B together, it will equal C. And another way you could look at that is you could take A and B and they would both fit exactly in C's square. So your parts of a right triangle, we call sides A and B the legs of the right triangle, and then we call side C the hypotenuse. Okay, they won't always use A, B, and C, but what you need to know is that the hypotenuse is always going to be the side that is opposite the right angle. So here's my right angle, my hypotenuse is this side right here. So you always want to look for that right angle and find the side that is opposite. Okay, you want to make note of this formula right here. This is what you use. This is the Pythagorean theorem. This is what you use to find the missing side of a right triangle. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And if you remember, on the last slide, I told you they won't always use A, B, and C. What you have to know is which two sides are the legs and which side is the hypotenuse. So you will always take the leg squared plus the leg squared, and that will equal the hypotenuse squared. And again, only works if it's a right triangle. So keep that in mind as we go through this. So let's do some examples. So here is a right triangle. I want you to find the missing length, so I want you to find x. So first of all, I'm going to note that x is the side that is opposite the 90-degree angle. So I know x is going to be my hypotenuse. So when I set this up, I know the formula says leg squared plus leg squared equals the hypotenuse squared. So my legs are 5 and 12. My hypotenuse is x. So I'm just going to plug my numbers in. 5 squared plus 12 squared equals the hypotenuse, which that's x, so x squared. And then we're just going to solve this. 5 squared, remember, is 5 times 5, which is 25. 12 squared is 144, and that has to equal x squared. 25 plus 144 is 169. Now that equals x squared. I don't want to know what x squared is, I just want to know what x is. So, just like adding and subtracting are opposites, multiplying and dividing are opposites, to get the opposite of squaring something, you take the square root of it. So we're going to take the square root of 169, and that's going to equal x. So what number times itself will equal 169? That's what we're trying to figure out. So take a minute, see if you can figure out what that is. Square root is 13. So 13 would equal x. Okay, moving on, example number 2. Now notice this triangle is facing a different direction, but that doesn't mean you change anything. I still want to look for the hypotenuse first, and I know that that's the side opposite the right angle. So here's my right angle. My side opposite from it would be the 10. So this time I know my hypotenuse, and I need to figure out one of the legs. So here's my formula. Leg squared plus leg squared equals the hypotenuse squared. So I know one of my legs is x, so x squared. The other leg is 8, and the hypotenuse was 10. So x squared plus 8 squared equals 10 squared. We have x squared plus 8 squared is 64. 10 squared is 100. And I'm going to solve this equation. So I need to work on getting the x by itself. So I need to subtract 64 from both sides. And I'm left with x squared equals 36. And remember, to undo squaring something, we have to take the square root. So we're actually trying to figure out what the square root of 36 is. What number times itself would give you 36? And we know that that is 6. So our answer is 6. And then finally, we have a word problem. Whenever you have word problems like this, it's going to be helpful to draw a diagram to help you see it. So we have a tree that stands 24 feet tall. So here's my tree, and I know that it stands 24 feet tall. And it casts a shadow that is 7 feet long. So there's its shadow. And it wants to know how far is it from the top of the tree to the end of the shadow. So I'm going to go ahead and complete my triangle here. And that's what I want to know. So I want you to pause the video for just a minute and work through this and see if you can figure out what x is. Okay, now that you have paused the video and worked it out, let's check and see if you're right. So the first thing I am going to make a note of is my hypotenuse is x. That's what I'm trying to figure out. So I need to set up my equation. Leg squared plus leg squared equals the hypotenuse squared. So my legs are 7 and 24. And my hypotenuse is x, that I don't know. And I'm going to start to figure this out. Well, 7 squared is 49, 7 times 7, plus 24 squared, and for big numbers like this you can use a calculator, so 24 times 24, and you get 576. That has to equal x squared. So 49 plus 576, we'll add those together and you get 625 equals x squared. So remember, I don't want to know x squared, I want to know just x. So I need to take the square root of 625. And again, you can use your calculator for that, and you end up getting 25. That means 25 times 25 is 625. So your answer would be 25 feet from the top of the tree to the end of the shadow.